Retro.
What's up, guys? This is Daniel Logan, Boba Fett from Attack of the Clones, The Clone Wars, Book of Boba, Skywalker Saga game, and hopefully many more things in the Star Wars galaxy. You are listening to Jay and Dennis on Podcast Stardust. Yep, this is the way I've spoken.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. We're your correspondents. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And it's Friday, so that means it's time for our weekly look at some Star Wars news. But Jay, before we dive into the latest from the galaxy far, far away, you want to go ahead and remind everybody what our social media contacts are?
Of course, Dennis, my pleasure as always. We are conveniently found on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
All right, that is the line. The signal's boosted to maximum output. The shield's down. We're now broadcasting to the galaxy. So here is the week's Star Wars news. And up first, this isn't really much of a story about anything that's going to happen, just some comments that John Boyega happened to make while he was speaking at Fan Expo Boston. And someone had asked him about the role that he played as Finn in the sequel trilogy. And his response to that was, I think I assumed he, being Finn, was Force sensitive from the Force Awakens script, or at least by the time I got to the end of the Force Awakens script. And then he went on to say, I thought they were planning dual Jedis. I actually thought that they would Obi-Wan and Darth Vader us, that being Finn and Rey, that we would turn against each other or something along those lines. So that is an interesting take on this. I haven't seen the Force Awakens script, so I don't know what in there might have given him that idea. But at least coming away from the movie itself, I don't think I ever got that impression that there was going to be a Rey and Finn, situation that was similar to Anakin and Obi-Wan. But what do you make of all this?
Yeah, I never would have saw that coming either. And John Boyega he's always been so all over the place in his interviews and some of the things that he said. And some of it has been very, very positive, and other things have been very, very negative. And he's always been so vocal about things. But one thing has remained true, is that he's always supported Daisy Ridley in her role and whatever that is, and it was. He basically, I know in one of the interviews I saw, he basically said that she gets to inherit the franchise. It's finally hers, kind of thing. And that he was so on board with that. But yeah, I mean, as far as the dueling Jedi type thing, I would have never seen that coming. But I know that there was a lot of creative differences between The Force Awakens and eventually, The Last Jedi, and then going on with Rise of Skywalker with different directors and rewrites and the whole nine yards. So I guess who's to say that it couldn't have happened, but I just don't see it. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, while you were talking, I was trying to think of what if anything in The Force Awakens would have been a clue towards that. And the only thing I can think of is, well, two things. One, when Rey first touches the Skywalker lightsaber and she has that vision, and she's very disoriented by it, and then there's that scene where Kylo and the Knights of Ren are kind of looking over her, and then she backs away and she's all scared. So that might have been some twisted vision of the future going forward. The other thing is in the duel with Kylo Ren, when she finally gets the upper hand on him and slashes his face, and then and hits him in the leg, and then she just kind of stalks with that very angry expression on her face, that perhaps that could have been the clue, the type of clue that we always look for in the prequel trilogy with Anakin and his fall to the dark side. I don't personally think it's enough, but again, maybe something in the script set him off a different way of thinking on that. But I don't know, just thinking about it, I mean, I think what they did is instead of making it a Finn and Rey type of a situation where they were pitted against each other, that was Daisy and Kylo, or well, I should you be consistent here, Daisy and Adam, Driver. In that case, as Rey and Kylo Ren uh, as the antagonist Force users in the series. And I don't blame John Boyega for being a little disappointed with the way everything fleshed out, because that was the promotion for The Force
Right.
Awakens. Going to that movie, all the images were him in the lightsaber, the poster of him in the lightsaber, and Rey had her staff and stuff like that. And then they really backed away from that. And it wasn't too long ago, we were doing a news episode where he had made comments about whether he was going to be in the upcoming new Jedi Order movie, and he basically said no. That's
Mhm.
Rey's or Rey. See, now I'm just conflating Rey and Daisy, but that it was going to be Daisy's project, and he's happy for her, like you were saying. So,
Mhm.
uh, but it's
Yeah.
interesting idea. I don't know if that would have made it the sequel trilogy any better or any worse if they'd gone that route, but it is kind of a fun what if to talk about.
Oh, indeed. Yeah, and I think that a lot of fans agree that his character was so compelling at first because it was something that we had not seen before.
Right.
There's this really cool internal conflict. He was the stormtrooper that had a conscience and really set up kind of a promising journey for him, and it didn't really go anywhere. Like his character kind of plateaued, at a certain point. So I can
Yeah.
understand his hesitance to be totally positive sometimes because of
Mhm.
that, but then again at the end of the day, come on, you're in Star Wars,
Yeah,
it's like
and he
awesome.
still professes to be a Star Wars fan.
Oh, for
I think
sure,
he's just
yeah.
disappointed that the way that him and Kelly Marie Tran and the minority actors kind of got the short end of the staff when it came
Hmm.
to the portrayal and the other movies of the trilogy. And I totally get that, but I'm just thinking back to like all the speculation that came before the Force Awakens, and we talked about this at the beginning of the year. We did an episode on that, but all the hype that was before the Force Awakens, and people were trying to figure out who and what Finn was. Because as you just said, he shows up in the trailer as a black stormtrooper, and that was unexpected. But then it was, well, was he always a stormtrooper, or is he pulling a Han and Luke and stole stormtrooper armor and was now on the run?
Right.
And then when we saw images of him with a lightsaber, it was like, well, was he a Jedi? Was he a student of Luke's, or what was the situation here? That was such a fun time. Uh,
Oh,
you
it
know,
really was.
I know we've talked about this, but just the speculation, the theory crafting, and everything that went into the release of The Force Awakens, and then finally getting to see what actually was the story there at the end, trying to figure out who Rey was, what her last name was, and then not getting it when that movie came out. So um, we're just not getting that again because we've got The Mandalorian and Grogu coming out next year, but we've had those characters much more recently, and there isn't that mystery around like a next generation to follow that comes with that. So it's just a different type of anticipation and hype, I suppose.
Hmm. Yep, well said.
Okay, another story kind of about the same era of movies, the sequel trilogy, and this comes from Hermione Corfield. And if you don't know who that is, she played Tally, who was the A-wing pilot in The Last Jedi, but she was appearing on Collider Ladies Night, and they were just kind of asking her about her role in The Last Jedi. And she went on to talk about how that she didn't really know anything about her character, and she said, yeah, at this point she's the quote is, yeah, I've read my whole backstory. I got sent the whole backstory of the character. I've got my dolls, I've got my Lego figures. It was really pretty wild, but that all came after. It was also, again, so secretive. It was sort of like you showed up on set, you're given your lines, and they're just like redacted. It's all very top secret. So I didn't know a huge amount about the character, but Ryan Johnson helped me out. And she, in fact, didn't even find out that she was playing a pilot until she got to her costume fitting. And she says, well, I found out when I was in my costume fitting. So they took us to a fitting, and I was like, oh, explicit of deleted. I'm a pilot. And they were like, yeah. I was like, okay, that's cool. So I shared this as like, there's not a lot to learn here, but when I started putting together notes, it was one, a light news week. A few more things have come out since I started doing this, but two, just kind of, it's fun hearing about the people who portray Star Wars characters, then collecting their action figures and the like, and then just like what that experience behind the camera was.
Oh, yeah. I mean, could you imagine? We've talked so many times about if we were in a Star Wars movie or if we were in a Star Wars project, like what kind of character would we want to portray? And
Mhm.
even though she only had seconds of screen time, just the fact that you know that you are a constant part of Star Wars history and that there's merch out there with your face on it and your
Mhm.
likeness and I mean that is so cool. And I love that she was really kind of geeking out over that and just the fact that just sharing how secretive everything is and again just that whole culture of I mean obviously there's NDAs but then there's Star Wars NDAs,
Right.
which is, I think we've talked about that plenty of times before that yes, the NDAs are definitely important, but then, when it comes to Star Wars, it's like a whole other level. So it's a fun story. I really enjoyed that one.
Indeed. Indeed. Well, moving on to some other television news, there was a big brouhaha at the beginning of the week set off by Ewan McGregor, as he was also appearing at Fan Expo Boston. And it was reported that he had confirmed he was going to be appearing in season 2 of Ahsoka. And as best I can tell, Jay, it was one person posting about it, I think on X, and then every outlet in the world ran with
Yeah.
it that that's what he in fact said. Not so fast. Lucasfilm and others have clarified things, and a lot of people like Variety and Deadline and whatever reached out to their sources and confirmed that he's not, in fact, appearing in season 2 of Ahsoka. So that begs the question: what happened? Well,
Mhm.
I've transcribed the exchange. The question he was asked was, being a part of this franchise is one thing, but are you a fan of Star Wars as well? And his response was yes. The follow up question to that was your favorite installment that you're not a part of? And his answer is, well, I like watching my wife, so I really enjoyed Ahsoka. I thought that was brilliantly done. It's so funny, like, she's shooting the second season now, and I know. And then he paused because he wasn't certain that he was allowed to say that. So he goes, "Is that a secret?" And then someone confirmed that no, it's common knowledge that that's been filming for a while. But he went on to elaborate. Well, she is anyway, and so I just finished doing a play. So I'm at home with our son, who's 4, which is funny because I remember when that kid was a newborn not too long ago. And
Right?
I take him to school and everything, and then I'm, bumbling around the house, and I'd fetch a FaceTime. I forget that she's going to be green. you know, she pops up and I'm like, oh my God, oh yes. Often she's in her trailer with all the head stuff on, without all the head stuff on, but she's just green. She's a very beautiful green lady. So I love that. Anyway, is just kind of funny. I mean, this is like a case study, Jay, in how quickly a rumor can catch fire and
Oh, yeah.
spread in these days.
It truly is. Yeah, and it's so funny because a lot of these outlets that were reporting this were those that you and I typically use as our quote
Hmm.
unquote reliable sources. So I know I had sent you one of the posts on Instagram and I was like, wonder, what do you think? And then, leave it to you. I love the fact that you are always the voice of reason and that you definitely you double and triple check all the sources because I know even one of my son's friends was sending him articles about how this was going to be a thing and how they were so excited about this and and the whole 9 yards. So it's like playing telephone but in a digital age and it just got completely out of control. And quick aside, Ewan needs to talk to my husband because he has had a very similar situation with me. Whether it's me being green, like FaceTiming him after one of my cons or orange or whatever without the headpiece. So I had to laugh at that because I'm like, "Oh, yeah, he has a kindred spirit in my husband, that's for
Yeah,
sure."
I've seen plenty of images, even green and orange too. But yeah, without the head tails, I can imagine.
Yep.
That's funny. Yeah, it was just funny because yeah, you'd sent me that article, and I was like, that's bizarre that that would come out this way by who and so I've gotten to the point now where even if it is one of the main industry magazines that reports all this stuff, because Lucasfilm seldom like breaks this news anymore. It's usually
Right.
comes through one of these other outlets, but I'll double check it to see if anyone else is reporting because usually when one does, then the others reach out to their sources and they confirm, or they get a different story, or they get additional details or whatever. So, where there's smoke, there may be fire. And then the more you check, the more you learn. And the first one that came up that I sometimes use said, no, that's in fact not what's happening. And then I went back and looked at your article again, and they had already updated it and said, oh, that's not in fact what was said. So it's a weird commentary, because you got to take these things with a grain of salt until you get one of the trusted sources out there, because people are so eager to be first to report the stuff that they don't sometimes go through all the fact checking that they should on this. And then, that leads to things spreading like wildfire. And then once it's out there that way, people don't normally stick around to see when it's redacted or retracted, I should say, in that case. And, you're talking about Colby getting stories sent to him. I've heard about this twice more this week. And I'm like, yeah, sorry to disappoint you, but that's already been clarified that that's not in fact what's happening. And then it's left to explain it like, well, he was actually talking about his wife.
Right.
And people are like, well, who's his wife?
Yeah. I know a lot of people don't know that. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, I hope that this has helped clarify it for people who didn't already know that Ewan McGregor is not going to be in Ahsoka season 2. That's too bad, because it would have been fun having flashback scenes with both a young Ahsoka, Hayden Christensen, and Ewan McGregor. I mean, Ariana Greenblatt and Ahsoka, those scenes, live action, seeing Ewan in the classic armor, the Clone Wars armor, all that would have been fantastic.
Oh, and I know Ewan is totally up for it too. He said that on numerous occasions.
Yeah.
So,
well, they need to make it happen somewhere.
I know, right?
Sooner rather than later. Okay.
Please make it so.
Okay. Well, moving on.
It would make it so.
Indeed. We have the new trailer for Lego Star Wars Rebuild the Galaxy Pieces of the Past. That came out just today. We are recording this on Thursday, pulling back the curtain just a little bit. And again, they're confirming that the 4-part miniseries arrives on September 19th. I'm not going to go through this thing blow by blow. It would just take too long. And it's easy to find on StarWars.com and other places if you want to go see it yourself. But there are some fun things that stood out to me that I put in our notes. But how about you, Jay? Was there anything fun from this? Well, I guess I should just refresh everyone on what this is. This is the sequel to the Lego series that came out, I guess it was last year, called Rebuild the Galaxy, where everything in the galaxy got mixed up. You had rebel AT-ATs, and many of the Sith were Jedi, and some of the Jedi were Sith, and you had Ewok bounty hunters. It's set in the Lego Star Wars universe, and this is the sequel to that. And they're doing more mashups, and they're playing in this rebuilt Star Wars galaxy, fighting a new villain known as Salatus, who is trying to unmake the galaxy by, I'm not sure exactly what he's using, but it shows up as a big purple rift and destroys everything that it comes across there. But that being said, was there anything from the trailer that stood out to you?
Nice recap, first of all.
Oh,
So there was a couple of things, and one is the big giant Chewbacca that we saw, which is whoa, very, very large. But just all of the voice actors and just the people that have been contributing to this, because I didn't even realize, like, we knew Ashley Eckstein was going to be a part of this. That was like the big thing that she was going to be doing, the Brickheads Ahsoka. And then, of course, all of our favorite characters coming back and so on and so forth. But then I saw Kat Tabor posting about this, which is super cool. And even the poster shows Cal Kestis, and Cameron Monaghan is going to be doing that. So Kat Tabor is doing Pirate Queen Amidala. So that is super, super cool. And of course, the the Jackson, I love that. I'm a deep cut. That was hilarious. Love
I
that.
like the Darth Jar Jar Spider version that is kind of like the Spider Mall type of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't. I my memory is in the original series. Spoiler alert! Is that he kind of gets crushed under some bricks, but they're basically mashing him up with what happened to Maul in the Clone Wars with that half human, well, half alien humanoid species, half spider type of a thing, which is pretty cool. Getting to see the Landalorian again when someone says, "Oh, look, we found a baby Grogu," and baby's name is Yoda, baby. So Billy D. Williams is back to voice Lando. That was fun to see. And yeah, I'm just looking at the poster here, and I do see Cal Kestis. I hadn't noticed that before.
Yeah, it's
That's
such a
pretty
who's
cool.
who. It really
Yeah.
is because we've got so many great Star Wars personalities that are contributing to this in such a fun way.
And now Tudyk is going to be doing the voice of K2SO,
Oh,
a very
yeah.
large looking K2SO in
Yes,
this
indeed.
this piece. And then the other thing that stood out to me was the Porg Gill, which was a part Porg, part Purrgil. And it looked like a giant Porg flying through hyperspace.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was in the trailer. So
But
the
how
thing that's
fun.
yeah, okay, that's exactly what I was going to say. Slightly different words. Is like the fun thing about this movie or this series that I enjoyed so much about the first one was like it embraces the spirit of like Star Wars play with Lego, and taking things apart and coming up with new variations on stuff and mashing it up and let your imagination go wild. And we got the hot rod snowspeeder that shows up in this thing, and so a lot of fun ideas. And I'm looking forward to this. I mean, again, you can't take it seriously. It's something that's out there for fun, and that's what it's intended for. And you don't ever have to worry or argue about it being any part of canon. You don't have to consider it all, whether it follows all the rules or anything like that. It's just good Lego Star Wars fun.
Well said, and I couldn't have said it better myself. I think that's just such a perfect way to put it, that it's really based on play and
Yeah,
imagination, and that's what Lego's all about.
indeed. Indeed. All right. Last story we've got for this week's news, and completely let slip last week when I should have mentioned it. But the latest Star Wars novel is out, and that would be Sanctuary, a Bad Batch novel written by Lamar Giles. I'm not sure how I pronounce the last name. That came out on August 5th. I have my copy, and I've dove in a little bit. Have you had an opportunity to read any of this at all, Jay?
I have my Audible copy, but I have not dove into it just yet. I'm trying to finish up Trials of the Jedi, so I'm super
Yeah,
excited for this one, though. So what are your initial thoughts?
yeah. Spoiler: we're going to be covering Trials of the Jedi by the end of the month, so be on the lookout for that. And I got to reread that as soon as I'm done with this. Well, I am one third of the way through it, about 100 some odd pages, and I think it's a little less than 300 overall. Lamar nails it. This is the spirit. He captured the spirit of the Bad Batch with this one, and without giving away too many of the plot details, this takes place before season 3 when they're on Pabu, before they reunited with Crosshair. Before the end of season 2, because Tech is still around, and you've got Hunter, Tech, Wrecker, Omega, and Fee running a mission that's designed to benefit Pabu. And of course, things don't all go according to plan, and so that sets them off on their adventure. And they're running a couple different jobs at the same time, but just the dialogue and the interaction between the characters is what you're used to from having watched the Bad Batch. It's mainly told through a Hunter's perspective in a lot of the chapters, and then Tech has got the second's perspective that shows up the most. A little bit more, a little bit of Feed, a little bit of Omega, and some are a Wrecker, but our main point of view characters are Hunter and Tech, and I'm really digging it. It's just a lot of fun. It's set up in a structure where you get each chapter is only 5 or 6 pages, sometimes a little bit shorter than that, so that kind of helps with the pacing, and you're
Mhm.
moving through it. But just some of the things that were like never said on the show because it's everyone's inner thoughts that are coming out here, and you're like, oh, you could totally see that Hunter was thinking that. That's totally what it would be Hunter's perspective. So
Oh,
anyway,
that's awesome.
yeah,
So
I'm
adding
looking.
another layer to the Bad Batch, essentially,
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're gonna definitely have to put this on our list for things to cover probably sometime in September, maybe early October.
for
So
sure.
be on the lookout for that. It's a quicker read than Trials of the Jedi. That's a dense book. That's got so
Yes.
much to cover. Uh, this doesn't have nearly as many characters and as many perspectives, but there's a ISB agent that's an antagonist who's intriguing as well. So,
Mm,
but
all
definitely,
right.
yeah, I give it a recommendation right now. So make sure you go check that out. All right. Well, there we go. That is this week's Star Wars news. We hope you all enjoyed it. Thank you for joining us as we went through what's going on in the Star Wars land. And if you want to make sure you get our weekly edition of the news, make sure you subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already. We're pretty much available on all the podcatchers. If you want to dip into our very voluminous back catalog, one of the best places you can do that is over on retrozap.com, which is home of the podcast and several other great podcasts. Right now, the other active shows our Enjoy Stuff, Love, Death, and Robots Plus, Superhero Suite. They've all got recent episodes out there covering various aspects of geek culture. So make sure you go give them a listen. And then if you would leave us a rating review on your podcast of choice, that would be greatly appreciated as well. Jay, I want to go ahead and remind everybody what our social media contacts are and where else we have set up shop on the internet.
Wow, you had me at voluminous. That was nice.
Thank you.
So, yeah, just saying. So, we are on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust, and you can also check out our voluminous array. Love that's the word of the day of things over on Pinterest for everything Star Wars. And then we also have our 2 YouTube outlets, including the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music. So head over to both of those, like, subscribe, and share those out. And as Dennis said, we are literally everywhere else as well. So speaking of Audible, we are there. We are on Spotify and everywhere else in between. And if you are in need of some new swag or some new home goods with some Podcast Stardust logos on them, we do have our TeePublic store that does feature 7 different show logo designs available on all of those things and more that I just mentioned. So if you are interested in that, the link to that will be in our show notes. And we would love it if you'd snap a picture and let us know if you did get anything, because each one of those purchases does help to support the show. And we certainly do appreciate it. So thanks in advance.
Okay. Upcoming on the show on Monday, we're going back to the Clone Wars as part of our rewatch. We're looking at episode 16 from season 2. So make sure you stick around for that. And then on Wednesday, it is our monthly feature, World Between Worlds, where Jay has rounded up some recent finds from Star Wars lifestyle and fashion projects. So if you're looking for some things, that's a good episode to check out. But with that said, thanks for listening to episode 926, Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great weekend. And until next time, may the Force be with you.